Okay, Garrett, I'm about to hit broadcast.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're going to get started with our webinar in just a moment. We'll let everyone log in, and then we'll get started with our legislative forum conversation with our state representatives. We'll get started in just a moment. Good morning, everyone. My name is Garrett Sheehan. I'm President and CEO of the Greater New Haven Chamber of Commerce and the Quinnipiac Chamber of Commerce. We appreciate you joining us today for this legislative forum, a conversation with our state representatives. As always, we want to thank all of our partners that support us here at the Chamber and also our other streaming partners. These are other chambers that we work with across the region who share a lot of the webinars that you see us put on. We do have many investors, including Connecticut Natural Gas, Southern Connecticut Gas, and UI, who have helped support our business response efforts, and then all of our investors who have continued to be supportive of the Chamber as we've gone through this definite economic downturn. It's with their support that we've been able to continue to put on programming like this. Now, many of you know we, back a month ago, did a conversation with state senators. As we've gone through this pandemic, so much of the focus has been on the executive branch, but we know the legislative branch has been involved throughout the process and is now getting ready for a special session. So it's especially timely to be able to be joined by our state legislators today. And with us, we have Vincent Candelora, Representative Robin Porter, Representative Themis Claridis, Minority Leader for the House, and Representative Sean Scanlon. And thank you all for joining us. And let me just give everyone a rundown of our format here. We are going to take your questions, so you can start putting those into the chat box, and we'll get to those. But before that we do that, we'll start with each of our representatives and have them say a few words. So Representative Porter, thank you so much for joining us. And let me have you start us off. What are some of the things that are on your mind and topics? Obviously, there's a lot to do as we head towards a special session. I think we have you on mute there.
You think of thank you. Good morning to everyone.
We're losing your, it's freezing up a little bit. Maybe
session, as you know, the governor has
so we're having a little trouble with Representative Porter's line. It's just digitizing a little bit. Let me jump over to Representative Candelora, and we'll get back to Robin in just a moment. And Vinny, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate you coming on. What are some of the issues that you're looking at as we head towards the special session?
Sure, thank you. Good morning. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I mean, so essentially, obviously, we're going into session next week. There are 4 bills potentially on the table. I think Sean could certainly talk about the insurance bills with the telehealth and the insulin bill. We're looking at a police accountability bill, as well as putting procedures in place for absentee ballot voting. I think one of the things I'm shifting to right now is trying to start a discussion of the state's finances again. You know, eventually we're going to have to try to walk and chew gum and start paying attention to how we adjust for the declining revenues. We do have a bond commission next week. I'm a little concerned that the Finance Committee has not gone in as required by statute to readjust our revenue estimates to determine our bonding capacity. And so I'm just a bit concerned that we're sort of treating business as usual from a budgetary perspective when we're seeing just such a dramatic drop. So that's something I think that I'm going to continue to have a conversation over the next month, that we try to, you know, realign our budget, because come September, we are going to be looking at a deficit mitigation package once the comptroller certifies the deficit. So I think that's just another issue I put out there.
Thank you. Representative Sean Scanlon, thanks for joining us. Sean, what are some of the things that you're looking at for this special session?
Well, first of all, good morning, Garrett. Thank you for having us, and good morning to everybody who's on the line, and hi to Themis and Robin and Vinny. Yes, we are coming back next week, and I'm really proud of the fact that, as Vinny just mentioned, 2 of the 4 bills that we are going to be addressing next week are bills that I wrote and have been working on with my colleagues in the legislature before this pandemic really kind of happened, and will continue to. And I can get into greater detail of those, maybe a little later on in the program, but I would just say for now that for me, I really think that we've all learned a lot about what happened in this pandemic, and we learned what was working and what wasn't working. And I think what all of us should recognize, and what I certainly recognize, is that we can't just go back to normal in Connecticut. We have to figure out what the new normal is going to be, and we can't just keep doing things the way that we were doing them, because in a lot of ways they were not working. And so, sort of in light of what Vinny is saying, I really do believe that we need to figure out what we want the next generation of Connecticut to be. We have this very unique opportunity to basically start over and do things in a different way. And whether it's on healthcare or the way that we treat our workers or the state budget, I really do believe that we have a big opportunity here to do that. Would, of course, welcome the ideas of the folks that are on this call as to what they think we should be working on in that regard. But for me, as the chair of the insurance committee, 95% of that work will be with regard to our healthcare system, which we saw, perform really well for some people, and for others that were not so fortunate, not so well. And so I think we have to take a really hard look at healthcare, find ways to make sure that we can improve that, especially if we're heading into a second wave of the virus, and make sure that it's always accessible and affordable for everybody. And that's what I'm committed to doing, and look forward to talking about today and working with my colleagues on. So thank you again, Garrett, for having us, and looking forward to the discussion.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sean. And again, let me just remind everyone, you can start putting your questions into the chat. And I'll turn now to Representative Themis Claridis. And Themis, can you hear us? Themis is having some audio issues, so let me see if we still have Robin. Representative Robin Porter is on the line there. Robin, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Great. Yes, we can hear you. Sounds good.
Oh, good. Okay. I actually had to come in through the phone line because my internet is acting up, but I'm just assuming that it's everybody on Zoom these days. It's slowing us down. But I was just saying that we are slated to come in on the 23rd. The House will be in for a special session. Vinny and Sean have actually already talked about the bills that the governor is going to call us into. So I will just say at this point briefly that as the chair of labor, my concern is always what we're doing for business, as well as how we're taking care of workers. And because this pandemic has had a disproportionate impact on not just communities of color, but actually workers, Black and brown workers in the state of Connecticut, and actually nationally, that is the trend. I am looking to make sure that we level the playing field and that there's equity for everyone.
Great. Thank you, Representative Porter, and we'll get back to everyone in just a moment as we start getting some of our questions in.
I can hear you now. I can hear you now.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, Themis. Go ahead.
Right. I hung up and called back in. It was fine. Well, thank you for doing this, and thank you to my colleagues. I didn't hear what any of you said, so I'm sure I'm going to repeat the same thing. But I will just say, yes, we are going into session next week, and the focus on that session is going to be the police accountability bill and absentee ballots. Just to add my 2 cents quickly, clearly we have seen tragedies occur in the African-American community in regards to police, and that's why we are taking this very seriously and going into session to try and not just find a bill that looks good and sounds good, but a bill that will actually increase training to police officers. Make sure that, of all the good police officers we have, there's certainly bad ones that are doing things wrong, and those people are being taken care of, but making sure that we understand that there are a lot of good people out there, whether they're police officers or not. We want to make sure everybody is treated equitably and fairly. So whatever we put in this bill needs to actually help fix the problem and not just sound good. And as far as the absentee ballots are concerned, we know we've been pushing as state policy all these months. Please stay home if you can. social distance, masks, etc. And I think a lot of that has had to do with why we are doing so well now. We want to keep that up in this state. So if that people should be continuing to do that, we certainly don't want them to take a chance with their health on voting day. And we certainly don't want all those people who work there on election day, especially older people typically, to take any chances with their health. But we just want to make sure that this is defined for this election, and God willing, we'll be out of this next year and we'll be able to have elections in the normal way.
Thank you, Themis. And let me start with you. As we head into the special session, what should people expect? Is there already broad agreement? I know there's been bipartisan work on the police accountability bill, or is there going to be a lot of debate and this will be many days for the special session?
Well, I don't think we can accurately answer that question right now because we're a week out. There has certainly been bipartisan negotiations and conversation, which I think is best for all of us. This is an important bill, and it is something that deserves everybody sitting down and listening to everybody that has different perspective and different experiences than we have to find the best bill we can. And I'm hoping by next Thursday we will have an agreement. Doesn't mean it's going to take 5 minutes. There'll certainly be a lot of conversation and questions asked. I mean, this could take a few hours. This could take a few days. It depends where the bill ends up. But we want to make sure that every legislator has the right and the ability to ask as many questions as they need. So this bill is as clear and effective as possible. And in addition to that, we have a public hearing on Friday at 10 a.m. On this bill. So the public needs to be able to speak their minds for, again, suggestions, new things, old things, and that will be conducted via Zoom. And there are links for people to sign up for that.
And since you are in the leadership, just a logistical question, how will the special session itself work as far as social distancing and keeping all the legislators safe and having opportunities for people to see what's happening?
We will be going in as leaders on Monday, separate from the regular session in the House next Thursday, to figure out those rules and make sure that, again, we are legislators. We are elected by our constituents to be able to go up there and represent their interests and their concerns, and therefore we should all have the ability to speak, ask questions, to speak on the floor as we always have, but it's going to just look a little different. And we're going to figure out those rules on Monday. We have a new voting board that has the capability of allowing people to vote from their offices. They can't vote from their living room, they can't vote from their car, but they'll be able to vote from the legislative office building or the state capitol, so we can limit the amount of people that choose to be in the chamber. But it's going to be cumbersome and it's going to be a little difficult, but certainly if the democratic process of legislators being able to speak and ask questions is not worth it, I don't know what is. So we'll figure that out on Monday.
Great. Representative Porter, you've been a leader on social justice reform and putting together some of the proposals that are out there. What's your expectation with the police accountability bill, and then also how we tackle these larger issues in Connecticut as well?
I think that we have a good bill. It does need some tweaking in my opinion, but I feel like we can get there together. As the minority leader stated, this is an issue that needs to be addressed. It needs to be addressed now. And it's not just about accountability, though. That's the one thing that I want to say. Police accountability is a part of it, but the economic accountability goes hand in hand with that, because we can legislate and make changes to how we hold officers accountable, but until we change the circumstance and the conditions under which they police in Black and brown communities, we're going to still have issues around that. So for me, it's not just a matter of police accountability. We also need to be talking about economic accountability and how we bring equity to Black and brown communities that are suffering from disparities and actually been marginalized forever around substandard education, jobs, workforce, healthcare, all these things that were pre-COVID, right, have been exacerbated. So we have many spokes in the wheel, and I'm just hoping that we can come to an agreement that if we're going to be fully effective, we have to hit this at all angles so that the playing field is genuinely level. and that people have an equal footing.
And do you feel, obviously there's a special session occurring now, how does that, and there's momentum with the public, how do we carry that forward beyond just July special session and into more action?
Well, I think that the action is already occurring with the movement that we see on the ground. We've seen a lot of protests and rallies throughout, not just the state of Connecticut, but nationally. People are coming forward. We're seeing bodies on the line that haven't always been on the line fighting for these causes on the front lines. I think that makes a difference. The fact that we have the youth involved, and there's young people that are becoming active on all levels of this, just not along activism, but also around the political spectrum, getting involved at the local, the state, and congressional level, becoming involved with the boards of eds and commissions and things of that nature. I mean, all politics is local, and we're going to have to hit this on a local level and make sure that what we're doing is educating the public, educating our constituents on what it is they need, and have them do the same for us. Educate us, tell us, because the people closest to the problems are closest to the solutions, but oftentimes furthest from the power and the resources, and we have got to bridge that gap.
Thank you. Representative Candelora, so much of, there are so many things going on right now. You touched on the state budget, but just as we look at Connecticut's economy, we are doing, relative to other states, better with the virus right now, and that's a big help to allow businesses to be open. But as you look out at all of the economic devastation that's out there, what types of things can the state do, not just in this special session, but especially as we go forward?
Well, I mean, I think as we're seeing some are temporary, some are permanent impacts of the virus on businesses, I think the state moving forward, we're going to need to look at how we prop up some of these businesses. You know, I know there's a question about, you know, landlord tenant and the impact on homelessness. The other side of that equation is just rental properties in general. I know of a lot of businesses and residential housing that these landlords can't pay their taxes, they can't pay their mortgages, and they are starting to fall into foreclosure and getting into financial situations. You know, I don't know if in the future the answers are looking at property tax relief for these industries that have virtually zero ability to produce income. Maybe looking at, for our restaurant industry, giving a holiday for a few months on sales tax in order to encourage the takeout purchasing, because it's obvious that the bars aren't opening anytime soon. And, you know, that's such a huge part of the revenue generators for those businesses. So I think we need to start having that conversation of how those certain industries that we're able to try to prop up, because I am very concerned, you know, with the slowing of the airline industry. We're starting to see the manufacturing in that industry slow down as well. So the manufacturing layoffs are starting, and that wave is coming, and I think we're going to see that through August. So there is a lot of those complexities that we have to look at as a state and figure out how we prop up those businesses. I don't have all the answers yet.
Thanks. And Sean, it's been a public health crisis, not just with COVID, but we've heard of people who stayed away from hospitals, stayed away from doctors for a long time. I know you're talking about telemedicine for the special session coming up. And then there's also the issue of, hopefully we do have a vaccine, but then how do we get that out to the people, and how do we continue to do testing? So I'm throwing a lot at you right there, but all of these issues, what are some of your thoughts on them and going forward?
So I really worry about the perfect storm crisis that you could basically think up in a Stephen King novel could happen to us this fall, where for several months you had people not treating and managing their comorbidities. You know, that's diabetes, their asthma, their heart disease. They weren't going to the doctor because they were afraid to go to the doctor. There were basically no elective surgeries that were happening, and people throw out the word elective all the time and think that it's sort of cosmetic. No, those are important surgeries that people have to do to get better, to be able to function and live their lives. And then if you combine that with a second wave of the virus, I think you get a very dangerous situation where our healthcare system could easily be overloaded. And so what I think we need to do is be very smart about the fact with reopening to try to avoid that. I think we've done that. Now the question is, how do we keep it, and how do we start to get people to treat the health conditions that they have, be they mental or physical, so that if the worst case scenario does happen in the fall, that the system doesn't get overloaded. And one of the ways that we can do that is to continue making sure that telehealth is accessible to all people in Connecticut, so that they can continue talking to their providers, they can continue taking care of their comorbidities and the things that we saw unfortunately hurt a lot of people because they went untreated and then they got COVID. But as I was saying at the beginning, Garrett, there's no one silver bullet solution to this crisis. It's a continual effort to make sure that we are changing the healthcare system in Connecticut. And last, I would just say that, as people on this call may know, since World War II, we have really tied our health insurance to employment in this country. And we're one of the only places in the world that does that. And so we really have to think about, is it really the best way to get health insurance through your employer if we are going to be living in difficult times in which employment is not necessarily guaranteed anymore in the rate that it was at another point? And so I think we have a lot of questions to answer. I think the insulin and the telehealth bill that we're going to do next week are starting points. But we really have learned in this crisis that there are two healthcare systems. There's a healthcare system for people who have good insurance and have money. And then there's a healthcare system for people who are working class, who are paying tons of money to premiums, have high deductibles, maybe lost their job, and now their family is really struggling to be able to afford even basic healthcare. We got to do something for those people to make sure that they still have access to the care that they need and deserve, and stay healthy so that all of us can stay healthy.
Thanks. And Robin Porter, I'll go back to you. As we were just talking, there's also been a lot of health disparities for African Americans, Latinos, as COVID has hit. What are some of the things, we've all seen those numbers, what are some of the things that are the real underlying drivers of that that need to be addressed?
Thanks for the question, Garrett. I would definitely say, what we've been talking about, the housing crisis, the employment crisis. I start to say unemployment, and I guess I can't say that. Unemployment has always been an issue in communities of color, absolutely higher than the average. And now with COVID in full force, we're just seeing an exacerbation of that. So I think it's all rooted and grounded in, the economic accountability piece that I spoke of earlier, because, we're talking about a police accountability bill. We should also be talking about gun violence and what's going on in our community since this state has opened back up. And if you ask me, I believe that is all rooted and grounded in structural poverty. And the way that, the system has been designed to lock people in, and how we have criminalized poverty and poor people. So I think that is what we really need to be taking a serious look at as we look to undo, right, all of the unjust in the systems around criminal justice, education, healthcare. The fact that COVID is hitting our communities harder. Simple fact is we were already at a disadvantage, because if I look around my neighborhood, I have a ways to go to get to a grocery store, a produce store. I have corner stores, I have liquor stores. But what good is that? That's going to help to exacerbate high blood pressure, hypertension, heart disease. The fact that we have all these fast food places in our neighborhoods and no grocery stores. We've got to get to the root of the cause, Garrett, and we've got to pluck it from the root, because what we've been doing is really addressing surface issues and the symptoms that arise out of the root cause. So I say, let's get to the root of it. And I think that is addressing the issue of poverty and the gap, and the wealth gap in this state.
And I'll start.
Garrett,
go ahead, Dennis.
If I may quickly, if we want to talk about things that aren't coming up in this special session that are certainly of an urgent nature, we should also address the fact that state employees got over 3% raises on July 1st, when the rest of the state is falling to the wayside. The governor had the ability under his executive order to limit that, to suspend that for the time being. He used his executive order very liberally in regards to closing businesses, closing places of worship, while people who own businesses who operate with 1 or 2 employees may never open up again. I know Representative Candelora can certainly talk about that in regards to his small business. And so I'm not really understanding, if we want to talk about what should be brought up in session, the governor should have done that on his own. He claimed there was nothing he could do about it. Governor Cuomo did it. Governor Newsom in California did it. And these are all Democrat states with Democrat governors. So, you know, there's certainly a lot of things we should have been looking at and we should be looking at going forward. This state is facing a $3 billion deficit next year alone. If you think that that is not going to be tax increases, tolls, and every other thing you can imagine that we're going to put our hands into people's pockets, we should be addressing that right now. And again, this is not about the fact that, I mean, I have state employees that are family members of mine. This is not that people are good or bad, but we made the choice to close businesses for our health. We made the choice to close places of worship. We made the choice to do all of those things. And I understand those were health issues, but we are in extraordinary times and that takes extraordinary measures. You can't pick and choose losers in regards to who you're hurting.
Well, let me open that up to everyone. And obviously, you know, as we talk about the virus, our timeline for what we thought this was has constantly continued to expand out. And we're going to be in this for a while. And so that's just continued drain, not only on business, but also on the state budget. And at some point, we will have to address those issues. So I'll open it up to all of our legislators to talk about the state budget. I know it's not something that's being addressed right now, but it is going to rear its head. Sean, I'll let you jump in.
Well, you know, I think there's definitely talk happening down in DC right now in Congress about whether states should receive money from the federal governments. I obviously think that they should. That's not about blue states or red states. That's about all 50 states of the United States have had significant budgetary issues because of COVID. And obviously that remains to be seen whether that package will ever continue. But I think Themis is right. We do have a big deficit coming up. And I think we have to really figure out the way that we are going to balance that in the most responsible way, given that people in the state are hurting and people have had a big impact on their lives. There's not one of us on this planet that does not know somebody who lost their job, somebody who got COVID, somebody who's worried about paying their bills, somebody who's sitting around their kitchen table trying to figure out how they're going to make this work with, oh, by the way, I don't know where my kids are going to daycare. Oh, by the way, I don't know if my kids are going to school. Oh, by the way, I don't know if I have health insurance in the fall. So there's a lot that we have to process. My hope, though, is that we can do that in a way that doesn't get political, because I do recognize that we're in the middle of an election year. Obviously, we're going to have a very polarized presidential election, but we need to work together, Democrat and Republican, put aside those party labels, roll up our sleeves, and try to fix this as adults. And I hope that we will in the coming months, because all of us are in this together. Nobody is well served by us just sniping at one another and talking about political things. And I hope that we really can focus on helping people, because at the end of the day, that's what we all got elected to do.
Vinny, you started off talking about the budget. What are some of your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to try to get our process back to normal. You know, and what I mean by that is I'm very concerned about where we are with the budget. You know, Themis represented the $3 billion deficit, but we don't really know what that deficit is. So we had consensus revenue come in April 30th, because typically that comes after the tax filings on April 15th. Because the deadline was extended to July 15th, we don't know what our real consensus revenues are. So one of the things I think the legislature should be doing is amending the statute, at least for this year, because the governor refused to do this, despite our request, to have consensus revenue done on July 31st. So we understand what we're really dealing with, because we don't right now. The other thing I think that we should be looking at is the Finance Committee, by law, it's statute 2-35, is required to put in, to do revenue estimates to revamp. So we should be taking a look at all of that, because, you know, right now we're looking at issuing $800 million of bonds next week with the Bond Commission. If I had served on that committee right now, I would be a no vote, because I don't know how we bond $800 million when we don't even know if we've hit our debt limit. And I think Treasurer Wooden had pointed that out. We're coming very close to hitting that limit. So all of these processes that we have in place for good fiscal accountability needs to be adhered to. And if we need to modify them because of COVID, we should be doing that. Just like we modified the way our healthcare system is being delivered through telemedicine, we should be doing the same on the state budget. Until we do that, it's very difficult to say where we are and how we're going to solve these problems. It could be a $6 billion deficit. It could be a $3 billion deficit. And I think to Sean's point, I agree. I think the federal government needs to come in. That COVID money that was given to us cannot be used to fill holes. So it's being used for expenditures for COVID, which, you know, is needed, but in the long run doesn't help out the state in any way to get out of this massive deficit that really occurred because, frankly, so many businesses got shut down. You know, one of the other pieces of this that Connecticut, I think, could stand to gain, and we have to have a conversation, is the fact that all of our Manhattanite workers are now working from home in the state of Connecticut. And so the income taxes that are being generated from them working from home really belongs in the state of Connecticut's coffers, not New York City's. And that's a conversation I think the legislature needs to have, because I am not interested in seeing any type of a backroom deal between Governor Cuomo and Governor Lamont saying, here, you could keep some of that money. If in fact people are working and domiciled in Connecticut, those income taxes should be coming into Connecticut.
And Representative Porter, anything you want to add into this conversation?
I'm here, just trying to get my mute button off. Still having a little technical difficulties here, so forgive me for that. But I mean, the budget is something that we definitely need to be talking about and taking seriously. You know, we do, Minority Leader Themis Gladys is correct. We do pick winners and losers, and we shouldn't, but we do, right? So how do we get past that, and how do we solve that? How do we make sure that as we legislate a budget for this upcoming session, that is equitable, you know, that we are actually helping to, for lack of better term, bail out the people that need bailing out. I mean, the federal government has had no shame in bailing out corporations and banks. These folks have been too big to fail. What about the everyday workers? What about people like you and me? What I would like to see is them say they're gonna cancel our student debts. If you really wanna see our economy improve and revenue come back into this state, could you imagine if we had relief from student debt loans and the money that would free up for people to put back into this state's economy? You know, and then the other thing is, yes, we have our hands in people's pockets, but there's no equity there either. So we need to address the issues of equity when it comes to the tax structure in the state and how people are paying taxes. The more money you make, the more taxes you should pay. And I know that's a sore subject for a lot of people, but I want us to come to the table and talk about equity and what is fair and what is just. Because at the end of the day, as legislators, it is our job to legislate justice.
And let me ask this question, because obviously there's huge issues with the budget and lots of different ways to go about that and different ways that we can operate our state. And we, for so long, have been now operating with just the governor on executive order, and we understand why that needed to be done for a while. But obviously, COVID also keeps the people from getting together, like the legislature. So, how, even with an election happening in the background, do we tackle these issues? Do you expect to see more of a legislative role going forward, where it's been very heavy on the governor for the last several months? And I'll open that to everyone. Anyone can jump in first. There you go.
I would certainly hope so. It has been quite challenging, but like you said, we do understand the need for the governor to have that executive power right now because we are technically out of session. So that does leave much of the control in his hands, as well as the hands of our leadership in both chambers. And I think that the people, our constituents, are actually anticipating us getting back into those seats of power and being able to advocate for them in the way that they're accustomed to us doing. The challenge is going to be, what is the new normal and how will we conduct business moving forward post-COVID? with the threat of the fall bringing a resurgence.
I would just say that certainly this emergency situation was a case of first impression for all of us, from the governor down to the legislature, down to the people that live here. So we're all trying to do our best in regards to what is working and what isn't, and giving the governor those emergency executive authority powers was something that was important at the time. And that authority expires on September 9th. I do not support extending that at all. Remember, the governor, by definition, whether we are in session, not in session, has executive authority powers under normal circumstances. And if something happens that he believes is an emergency, he can do something in regard to that. But whether it's going to be difficult or cumbersome for us to go back into session or not, it is now our responsibility to take back the reins and move forward as a group, as a legislature, as people that the people of the state of Connecticut elected.
Yeah, and I would just add that I think the natural workings of the executive branch, there's less collaboration, I think, with the public, with the legislature, given the circumstances that we're under. And I think it's important that the legislature reassert its voice as things settle down with this pandemic and we start to figure out how we function under the pandemic, because I think the legislature, we're the boots on the ground. So we're getting all the phone calls, whether it's Department of Labor or DMV issues, the businesses having issues of how to reopen, how to do things better. And so I think there has to be an opportunity for those voices to be brought into the process. And I just think it naturally did not occur as well with the executive branch, because they're just not set up that way, the way we are. And it's important to reassert ourselves.
Sean, did you want to add something there?
I would just say I think the governor's done a really good job, and it's obviously hard for 187 of us to be doing some of the things that he's been doing given the demands of the job. But I agree with all my colleagues when I say that we're a little closer to the ground. We're hearing from people directly, and it's important for us to get back in the game. And I think we are going to be starting with this special session going forward. And I am really looking forward to hopefully having us tackle some more of the issues. The 4 that we're doing next week are important, but there's a lot more that we need to get to, and I hope that we will.
And I am sure that you are all hearing from your constituents as it regards to schools. So I'm interested to see what you think about what should happen with schools. Obviously, for businesses, for employees to be able to get back to work, even if they're working from home, having schools open, if we can do it safely, is critical for the economy. We hear that from all of our employers, and there's a lot of different messaging out there. I know the governor early on said that we were going back full time. I didn't hear a retreat from that, but I heard more options, I guess it sounded like, in the last week. And obviously we're juggling what we're hearing from other parts of the country as well, and from the federal government. So very interested to hear your thoughts on schools. And if we are going to do this, is the effort going on right now to actually get there? Because I'm certain that getting to full school is going to take an enormous effort on behalf of government to be able to open up. And I don't know if that's occurring, but interested to get your perspectives on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think every district right now is struggling with what reopening is going to look at. And I think, we hear a lot about, well, is it going to spread the virus, and the teachers are going to be impacted, potentially being exposed to the virus with kids that might be asymptomatic and carrying it. I think the other part of the equation that isn't talked about enough, that I think behind closed doors is being discussed, is how well did distance learning really go? I think there's a general concern for students that are high performing. Are they getting what they need out of it? Just with the AP exams, there was that national mishap with being able to log in. That was impactful. But also just children that are, food insecure, children that have never logged into distance learning from March going forward, trying to account for them. Special education, kids that have 504s, how are they addressed? I think largely districts really struggled with delivering educational services to that population. And so I think that's, all of those things are a real driver on why we need to go back into the school. And then of course, we see what happens in the southern states and everybody takes a deep breath and a pause. So it's really not an easy situation. I think districts are trying to struggle with it individually. But by and large, I think when you talk to parents, most people see the need to get their kids back into school for all sorts of those reasons, including just socialization for the younger kids. So, you know, my wife right now works in daycare, so she's in preschool. They've been back for about a month. It seems to be going well. And so hopefully if we can start that type of reopening, we could gauge where we're going, and I am hopeful we'll be able to reopen our schools for these kids.
Anyone else want to jump in on the schools question?
I'll weigh in. I mean, like, I am hearing a lot on the ground from parents and teachers as well. There is tremendous concern about the safety of students and paras and teachers and administrators, the faculty overall, returning to those buildings. You know, Representative Candelaria spoke to it a little bit about, you know, there is an education gap, and that was pre-COVID. And it's been widened due to the lack of access to resources like Wi-Fi and tablets. I mean, right here in my district, and I'll talk about New Haven, we started out with COVID, 2,000 students that were not online or engaging in long distance learning. By the time school was technically over and summer has started, that number has climbed to almost 3,000, over 2,900 students. So I'm talking about students in particular that have already started out at a disadvantage from the gate, from day one, from pre-K and kindergarten. And the issue that this just shows that, you know, it is a lack of resources and opportunity, and that's why I'm not comfortable with calling it an achievement gap. So what do we do to make sure that regardless of whether we open or we don't, these children in particular have what they need in order to get on the page, not even to catch up. They're that far behind, but just to make sure that they don't lose an entire year. And I think that we need to be getting more parent involvement, more parent engagement, more parent feedback. And this is what I'm hearing from parents on the ground, that, you know, they're having problems getting answers from the governor's office, problems getting answers from the Board of Ed, you know, in the district, and not being satisfied with what they're getting back. So I think it's something to be taken very seriously. And I want us to also look at the fact of, you know, not only has COVID hit us disproportionately, but so is this. You know, we're dealing with essential workers and the impact that it's had on majority Black and brown workers. These are going to be the same children that are going to be forced to go back when other kids, like, you know, I don't have kids, but if I did, I would have the option to stay home because I'm telecommuting. So how do we deal with the people that have the privilege and the advantage of being able to stay home and make sure that their kids are doing what needs to be done, and other parents that are having to go out and return to jobs, 2 and 3 jobs, just to make ends meet? So I think all of that needs to be a part of the conversation when we are talking about reopening schools, and how that is not just going to impact the school, the teachers and the students, but how that's going to impact the parents as well.
Themis, let me ask you, is this, the question, is it getting enough sunlight? Obviously, we know that districts are working on it, the governor's office is working on it, but as Representative Porter just brought up, I've heard a lot of parents feel disconnected to the process. Is this topic getting out there enough where people can interact on it?
You know, it's interesting you asked that, because I know I've certainly spoken to, Representative Candelora and a lot of members of our caucus. I'm sure Representative Scanlon and Representative Porter have had similar conversations, that all of our towns have been sending out surveys to the parents in the town saying, do you feel comfortable sending your child back to school in September? Do you plan on sending them back to school in September? Do you not plan on sending them back? And I know that at least 2 of my towns have had a resounding positive response to, they plan on sending their children back. I'm sure that may differ from town to town, but I was actually surprised that so many people felt as strongly as they did. And, you know, as all of my colleagues have mentioned, you know, what concerns me the most when we talk about this isn't just about learning. This is about socialization. This is about interaction. This is about all sorts of things that kids get when they're at school, particularly at a younger age. And what also worries me is I think this is disproportionately hurting the inner cities and the urban centers because they don't necessarily have the same parental involvement at home as some of our suburbs do. So do you want to talk about things disproportionately affecting and how people are being hurt that we don't intend to have been hurt? I get back in March and April and even May that it wasn't safe to send kids back. And I know that there are still many concerns, but we have to be able to balance you know, the pros and cons as to what hurt these children are going to incur more than they already have, particularly in our inner cities, than they haven't already. And we're going to have to do a lot of things. It's like session next week, right? It's not going to look the same. It's not going to feel the same. We're not going to act the same, but we're going to have to make sure we figure out a way to do this in the safest way possible so kids get that education, that interaction, that socialization.
And Sean, I'll wrap up this issue with you, but one kind of question around it. Obviously, there are teachers, even if we don't do full school, if we do a hybrid method, there are going to be teachers that are going to be going back in the classroom. There's going to be needing protections. Is the funding there? Is the effort there right now to be able to cover these costs, to start doing these things now, as we're starting to get under 2 months from the start of the school year?
Well, I think like everything else that we're talking about right now, there's two kinds of Connecticut, right? So in a place like Guilford, where I'm from and grew up and live now, you know, perhaps my district can be better equipped to handle that than say other school districts that are more strapped for money for all the reasons that we've been talking about here today and all the reasons that we know we have two versions of Connecticut. So what I really worry about is sort of leaving schools to their own devices, just sort of like states were left to their own devices. When it comes to things like PPE, I think we have to leverage our buying power as a state and our ability to help these districts, because I just don't think we can have every district be out for themselves when it comes to preparing. And I know that from talking to both my superintendent here in Guilford and the head of our teachers union, this is something that they are both equally concerned about. And people are literally losing sleep over this. There's veteran teachers who are questioning whether they can even come back to work to do the job that they love. And you know, forget parents. It's the teachers and the administrators that are just sort of scratching their head trying to figure out how to do this. And I just think this is a great example of a bill or a thing that the legislature should weigh in on. And I think all of us together, for all the reasons that we've been talking about, should get in the game and figure out what the policy is, instead of just leaving it to the commissioner and the governor, who are both great men and have done a great job so far. But I think it's time for other voices to get involved in the discussion.
We're coming up close on time, so I do want to just leave a couple of questions out there. I'll give each of you an opportunity to kind of close out, but a couple of questions that have come up. You know, one is business liability. That was something that was a very big concern as we started the reopening. I don't know, I have not seen a case in Connecticut yet that's gone along those lines. There may be one that's out there, but I know that's still a concern, especially as we've only had a small amount of people go back into the workplace. And economic activity is slow at customer locations. So it is still a big concern of our businesses. And then also how we are going to handle workers going forward. We obviously had a lot of challenges at the Department of Labor when all this hit. There are going to be people who it's not safe for them to come back because of their medical conditions. So those two topics and anything you want to close this out on. And Sean, maybe I'll start off with you.
Well, you know, we obviously, and Robin talked about this a little bit earlier today, Robin and I have been working as both the chair of the insurance committee and the chair of the labor committee on a workers' comp bill to try to make sure that those who were on the front lines that we asked to stay in the workplace and work for us while we were mostly at home are taken care of and they're handled. And I saw a question in the chat bar about how New York said that would cost $33 billion. I just remind folks that New York has 16 million more people than we do in Connecticut. And we're talking about a very narrow scope of this for the very earliest days of this pandemic. I've lived this myself. My brother is a police officer. He contracted COVID, as did 40% of his police department in the second and third week of March. And so, you know, people can tell me that is because my brother was out at barbecues or he was doing other things. That's not the case. He's a police officer. He's working 5 days a week and trying to help people out and do things at a time when we were all really freaked out about this. And so for those folks and the folks that were on the front lines, I do think that we have to try to find out a way to do this and do it in a responsible way. And I think that we're on the path to doing that. It was not something that we're going to address in the July special session, but I think that it's something that we have to look at for September, especially if this is going to continue to be a problem. But I would just say in general, Garrett, we do have to look at the liability issue. And I think that that's been an issue that we've sort of talked about on the fringes. And I think that there's some conversations happening, but we got to make sure that our businesses are protected, because a lot of them have taken a significant hit. A lot of them are sort of just getting their sea legs back. I talk to restaurant owners and business owners every day in my district who are worried about this. Some of them have opened up for just outdoor dining, but they're terrified about doing indoor dining. Some of them are still doing curbside pickup for dresses and t-shirts in their stop because they don't want people to come to the store. They're freaked out about it. And so I really do think that, again, not to be a broken record here, but these two issues are exactly the kind of thing the legislature needs to get in the game on. And I am hoping that I can be a part of leading those conversations along with my 3 other colleagues on this call.
Sean, thank you so much for joining us. Representative Candelora?
Yeah, I think to piggyback off of that, we really have to take a look at the impacts to businesses. You know, I understand that we have a lot of issues to address with employees and how they were impacted. But, you know, I reopened my business and we're at 50%. We brought back less than half of our workforce. We've reduced our labor by 60%, not because we wanted to, but we just don't have a choice. And trying to pay your fixed costs, your taxes, your insurance, your electric bills, your rent, things that don't go away, and sustain yourself is very difficult. And I'm very concerned. I have an outdoor facility, so that's where our revenue is coming from. Our indoor isn't even open yet, and I don't even foresee it being open through to September. And so I'm worried about, as we talk about a resurgence or an increase in the fall, what impact is that going to have on the hospitality industry or, you know, my industry's recreation? We have to figure that out and how to keep it going, because the unemployment benefits are running out. The federal bump up is running out for employees. The only way this is going to work is if we do things that are going to help prop up these businesses and allow them to continue to sustain. So I think, like the workers' comp bill, we do have to look at what kind of cost that may end up shifting to businesses, if any. It may be minimal, but to what degree can the COVID funds that came in sort of supplement those items? Because, you know, obviously the employees were impacted by no fault of anybody, including the business. It's just that it was an unfortunate pandemic that we're in. So to what degree could the state come in and prop up that so those costs don't fall on businesses? I think is a balance that we're going to need to strike. And I think we're all well aware of it because, you know, as Sean pointed out, we hear from the employees, but we're hearing from the business owners that are supplying these jobs as well. And we've got to navigate the tightrope. And I think, you know, the bipartisan cooperations are important because at this point, these aren't party issues. You know, these really are Connecticut issues.
Representative Porter?
Thank you, Garrett. I'm glad that this came up, and I will say that as Sean or Representative Scallon has stated, you know, this is something that insurance and labor have been working on. I will say that I don't agree that this should wait till September. We're talking about service workers who all of a sudden got classified as quote unquote essential workers, but haven't been given the essential needs they need. They didn't have proper protection starting out. We still have proper protection, PPE issues right now. COVID has not ceased, right? We're still in a pandemic. And these are the workers that allowed this state to stay open while people like you and me and folks on this panel had the luxury and the privilege of sitting at home and telecommuting. The governor said, stay safe, stay home, except for this population of people. We need you to go to work. And that's fine with first responders because that's what they signed up for, right? But these workers did not sign up to put their lives on the line through the work they do. But here we are, and that's what we're calling them to do. That's what's been mandated for them to do. And if we can't take care of them, because we didn't on the front end of this, surely we can take care of them on the back end of this. I have a sister that works in a nursing home who was COVID positive. In fact, the nursing home that she works at was taking in COVID positive patients from Yale, New Haven without anyone knowing. The workers, the faculty, for an entire month, they were exposed without the knowledge and without the protections. And if you ask me personally, that's criminal. And this is what they have been subjected to. And now we're telling them that they need to wait till September in order to have a workers' comp presumption, the thing that we automatically provide for folks that we know need these benefits. They're having to deal with not just the disease and hopefully recovering. And even when they recover, there's still issues. I haven't had one constituent yet that is fully recovered, even though they have made it home from ICU. I have a constituent in particular who herself had COVID, is recovering at home, and had to bury her husband because he didn't make it back home. 48 days on a ventilator, and she had to bury him. So now we're talking about the fiscal impact that this has on a family because, you know, the breadwinner in the family is gone. So yes, we talk about, you know, making sure that we take care of businesses and what the impact on business is. And let's talk about the expense rate that has been frozen. And that's something that we're looking at extending, right, to help businesses. But we also have to help the workers because there's no profit, there's no business, there's no economy, there's no revenue without workers. None of this happens. You can't be in business without these workers. So why don't we take care of them while we can? Because we should have done this a long time ago. And we have to own that. I'm gonna own that. And that's why I'm gonna continue to fight to make sure that we address this issue sooner than later, because we don't get to call them essential workers and treat them like sacrificial lambs, literally being led to slaughter. People are losing their lives. Their family members are losing their lives. I have a member who tested COVID positive, got sent home to isolate. Her mother got COVID and her mother died. You can't put a price on that. How do you pay somebody back for that? We don't get to do that. But what we can do is make sure that we're taking care of them the same way that they have taken care of us from the very beginning. Out the gate, these people showed up and they continue to show up, committed and dedicated to the work that they do, committed and dedicated to this state in ways that we have not been called to be dedicated. So I'm very much a staunch supporter of making sure that we get this workers' comp done. And I'm glad that Sean stated the fact that New York is a much larger state than we are, and the fact that workers haven't been on the job. So let's talk about the savings that is going into not having any workers' comp claims because there's been no workers to claim, right, a compensation. There's many, we can afford to do this. That's the thing that I will end with. We can afford to do this. If we paid every single claim that has been filed, I do not believe it would come to $1 million. And that's just me with no fiscal note or, you know, no information from my financial people. That's an estimate that I'm making in my head. And I think that we have to do right by these workers and we have to bring equity to the way we do business, not just with the businesses, but with the workers and the employees that make business possible.
Thanks, Representative Porter. Appreciate it. And Representative Claridis, we'll close things out with you.
Well, thank you. And thank you to my colleagues for doing this. Thank you for setting this up. I think the more of these things we do, the better, because people are more informed and able to ask questions. I just wanted to answer one of the questions that was submitted on the question list. They had asked about what is going to happen with the claim yesterday that many state employees who are full-time state employees and been getting paid have been also collecting unemployment. Now, clearly people are innocent until proven guilty, and there is an investigation going on now to find out about that. But I think that goes directly to the point of what Representative Porter said, right? We have gotten to a place where you either support businesses or you support workers. To me, you can't support one without the other. Workers cannot work unless businesses are in business, right? I mean, it's natural. One does not occur without the other. So I think you have to support both of them. You can't, this is not a choice of picking one or the other. But the problem is that businesses that want to open up and workers that want to go to work in a safe environment are being hurt by fraud all over the place. You know, and you see an example of this. If God forbid this is true, there are people that are full-time employees and getting paid full-time salaries, getting paid their great health care, you know, able to get a pension, and now they're getting unemployment that other people like Robin Porter talked about should be getting, you know, paying for PPE that we could have been paying for. This is a travesty. This is a travesty, and it's got to be looked at. It's being investigated now, and I would hope all my colleagues would be firmly behind the fact that if this is happening, not only should that money be paid back, but these people should be prosecuted. I mean, this is a ridiculous thing. Again, you know, I'm not painting a broad brush across everybody, but there is an allegation. The auditors have gotten this complaint that this is happening, and they're investigating it now. That's what's scary. We want to make sure we take care of the people in this state. We want to make sure we take care of our healthcare workers who are on the front line every day in the best way we can. But we want to make sure that people that are taking advantage can't do so, and a strong message is sent from this state that will not be tolerated.
Thank you all for joining us. It's been a great conversation. We know a lot more will be happening next week with the special session, and there are many more issues to tackle than can be tackled in that special session. So we'll continue this dialogue. Hope everyone has a great day. We'll have more webinars next week, and we appreciate you all joining us. Thank you.
Thanks, Garrett.
Thank you, Garrett.